What do you learn in medical school, but you really don't know? What are the true lies in medical school? Wow, you know what? There's a little story to this. Robert Lufkin is going to be our next guest, and he's going to tell us a little thing about a little thing. He wrote a book on it, but I'm not going to be the one that's going to spoil it.
Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk.
Robert, welcome to Shed Talk.
Oh, thanks so much, Kevin. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
You know what? It's been exciting because I've been trying to get a hold of you, and we booked you like months and months ago, and we were never able to connect. But once we were able to connect, and here we are, we're finally there to connect, and we're talking about the show, Health, Wealth, and Mindset, right at the beginning and what we're all about. But you hit perfectly in our demographic and what you talk about with health longevity secrets. Can you tell me just a little bit about how you got started into all this?
Yeah. I mean, my background is I'm a physician. I represent Western medicine, kind of allopathic medicine. I basically spent my entire career as a professor in large medical schools in Southern California, UCLA, USC, and by doing that allowed me to not only practice medicine but also teach and do research. So I'm a product of Western medicine, but what got me on this journey and what the book is about is it's very critical of Western medicine, and I want to go on the record that even though the book is critical of Western medicine, I still believe in it. In other words, if I get hit by a car today, I'm going to want a blood transfusion and my bones set and my spleen removed. But the problem is Western medicine. I mean, it transformed our lives in the 20th century. Those of us who were around then, it made the world truly a better place by getting rid of infectious diseases and things. And the problem is in the 21st century, we're facing a tsunami of diseases that I eventually faced myself, all the way from obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, mental illness, Alzheimer's disease. And these diseases are in epidemic proportions, never before seen in history. And when Western medicine takes the same pills and surgery that were so effective in the 20th century against the diseases then, they don't really work for these diseases. And that's what the book's about. And the way I got started is I came down with four of those diseases, and I went to my doctor, and they prescribed me pills for each of those diseases. And I realized that, this wasn't going to end well. And, I asked them about lifestyle. Does lifestyle really work? And they go, nah, not really. You're going to be on these medicines for the rest of your life, so get used to it. And I knew enough that I began to question what I had been teaching, what my colleagues, many of them still teach. And I realized there's been a revolution in our understanding and the knowledge about the effects of lifestyle with these chronic diseases. The medicines work, no question, but they work on the symptoms. And the problem is the diseases continue to progress. You treat the symptoms, you may feel better, but the diseases get worse and worse and worse. The great thing about lifestyle is it not only takes care of the symptoms, but it also takes care of the root cause. So the disease actually stops and reverses in many cases. And long story short, I made some relatively simple changes to my own lifestyle, and I was able to reverse those four, essentially potentially fatal diseases. And now I've made it my mission to help others take back their health and hopefully not make the same mistakes that I did.
Well, okay, well let's dive into that a little bit because you mentioned four diseases, and I'm sitting here and I wanted to create curiosity, and I'm going to ask a better question. All right, what's the first disease? And you got called out, okay, as just a normal patient would. Yes, you have a little bit more background and everything than the normal person, but going through that first stage of knowing what was the first disease that you caught you that you had.
I mean, interestingly, they all sort of came on at the same time, but probably the main one and the most significant one was type 2 diabetes, is insulin resistance, or pre-diabetes, which is an abnormality of blood sugar that your audience probably knows about. That today we're again facing epidemic proportions of people getting it to the point where in a very short time, 50% of people may have prediabetes or diabetes.
And then how do you go from that the next slide? Because in your book, you're going to be talking, you were talking about health. And then with medicine, is there a line between the two? So here's the medicine that you're going to take. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, change your lifestyle. Well, if your lifestyle's already changed, is there another way they'll say, no, you need to take these pills and then stats, or is it stats or whatever they call them? And then versus the fight against natural path. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. There's a lot of things to unpack there. And let me say my thinking changed on it as well. I mean, as I used to think that diseases started when the doctor diagnosed them. You know, you walk in, oh, your blood sugar's high, you've got diabetes, or you forgot your keys, you have Alzheimer's disease. And I'm not making light of any of these diseases, but I'm trying to illustrate the point. And I realized that there is a sort of a natural cutoff when the doctor makes a diagnosis. That's necessary for insurance and billing and just the mechanics of our healthcare industry. That you have to start somewhere. But a very significant thing that I wasn't aware of before that now is obvious to me is that these diseases, the ones that I mentioned, they don't really begin when the doctor diagnoses them. In other words, the day the doctor told me I had prediabetes, 2 weeks earlier, I didn't. Well, it's not like that. These diseases begin days to decades before the time the doctor diagnoses them. What does that mean? Well, if I wait until the doctor diagnoses one of these diseases, I've missed a tremendous opportunity for prevention. And prevention happens with lifestyle. So, I have friends that go, hey, I'm healthy. I'm not going to worry about my lifestyle now. I don't have any diseases. When they tell me I have Alzheimer's, then I'll worry about my lifestyle. No, that's not the way it works. We're all on the path to get these diseases. Now, we all don't get Alzheimer's. We all don't get a heart attack. We all don't get cancer. But as Jim Morrison famously said, nobody gets out of here alive, right? So we're going to get one of those diseases, and we're on the path to get them. And by changing the lifestyle, and it's interesting, it's the same lifestyle approach is for all these diseases. The same thing that works for Alzheimer's also works for obesity, diabetes, and everything. So the point is, we need to start thinking about lifestyle when we're in our 20s, not when we're in our 70s and start having symptoms like that. The other thing I realized was that even though I'm a doctor, I realized that as a patient, doctors don't really make me healthy. If I go to my doctor, it's just to get less sick. Doctors can make us unsick from a disease. But if I want to be healthy, no doctor can do that for me. That's on me as a patient. And the way I get healthy is through the lifestyle choices I take every single day. When I wake up, I decide, how am I going to exercise, what I'm going to eat, when I'm going to sleep, all those things. And it's really in my hand as a patient. It's very, very empowering. But it changes the way we look at things. Doctors try to fix disease. They don't necessarily make us healthy.
So when you're talking about the healthy aspect of it, okay, you got to start when you're 20. You got to eat healthy, whatever that is. What does a daily routine look like for yourself? Because you've gone through it, you've written a book about it. What does your daily routine start in the morning on health?
Well, yeah, what I do is I get up. I get up early, sometimes real early.
What's real early?
Well, my kids get up at 6 o'clock and they got to catch the bus and they got to, do a bunch of stuff. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. So if I need to do this before they leave, depending on what my schedule is, because otherwise they leave at 7 and then my schedule opens up, but I may have work to do at that point. So getting up early, maybe getting up at 3:30. At 3:30, I go to the gym. But to make it interesting, I go to a coffee shop, which opens at 4:30. The coffee shop's about 4 or 5 miles from my house, and I walk there. So every morning I'm walking like 10,000 steps. I have a cup of black coffee at that point. I may look at social media, open my computer. Then I go to the gym. I don't go to the gym every day. I go every other day just because I need to give my muscles a rest. It's for strength training primarily, which is one of the big longevity secrets that I'm really surprised how many people aren't aware of. That, we ought to be lifting weights. If you're 30, you ought to be lifting, and if you're 70, you're harming yourself if you're not lifting weights or doing strength training, basically.
So you'd recommend over cardio?
Yeah, I mean that's cardio is really important for a number of things, for heart fitness and all, but for overall metabolic health, strength training is key by maintaining muscle mass. Because one of the things when people get older is they start losing muscle mass. It's called sarcopenia or frailty. We've all seen it with a stereotypical picture of the old person. They're thin, they're frail, they don't have muscles. When we don't have muscles, muscles do a lot of things. They allow us to metabolize glucose much better. They help our metabolism. In fact, the one of the most powerful drugs that our body produces for our brains is called brain-derived neurotropic factor, or BDNF. What's the primary source of BDNF is from exercise. So working out in the gym actually helps your brain and everything. So I'm a big fan of exercise, but particularly resistance training.
So what age would you say someone doesn't work out their whole lives and then say they need a pivot? Like, and one of the things that we were talking about earlier is like suicide rate amongst men. It's between 55 and 75 is the highest suicide rate. With the average white guy, it's 70%. And for men finding purpose in life, just where they are, where they're going, what have you seen in this and say would give to a man, okay, out there? And I'm not talking women or the younger generations or anything. It's just because in my age bracket, we're seeing that. What kind of advice would you give out there and talk to people like that?
Well, I mean, a lot of, I mean, I
Yeah.
could give my opinion, but just strength training. I personally had never set foot in the gym until I'm in my early 70s and I started lifting weights, and now it's I love it. It's transformative. I've seen my metabolism improve. I do a lot of things with lifestyle, but strength training is really helping. And that's for me, and that's for exercise. But you can start any point in life in doing that. But having a purpose is really, really important. You're hitting on perhaps what may be the most significant factor in longevity. I think the idea of a purpose, because if you ask people, hey, do you want to live longer? And they go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll live longer. And they go, why? You're going to retire at 60, right? Or 65. What are you going to do if you had another 60 years? And they'll go, well, I'll go see my grandkids, right? Everybody loves family. I'll connect with people. I will play golf, and everything like that. And which is good, no shame on, no judgment on any of those things. I'm a miniature golfer myself, but the thing is, after a while, just hanging out with your grandkids or something, they have their own lives.
Yeah.
It's good to do it, but it's not a full-time job. Same thing with golf, and what I think the second 60 years of our lives is an opportunity that is being missed, and reframing our mindset around that as not just a way to, hit the slot machines and play golf, and because, that's not, imagine the first 60 years of your life, how we all transformed, how we grew, how we matured, how we acquired wisdom. It's amazing, that journey. Now imagine another 60 years upon it. So don't just be the person you are at 65 and then just play golf for another 60 years, but imagine transforming into something completely different with the wisdom now that you don't make the foolish mistakes we made at 20 or 30. We make new mistakes, but they're new mistakes with the added wisdom of 60 years of experience. And that life, we could transform the world. We need the wisdom of our elders. We need old people to to help us in this world, aside from the fact that the birth rate is plummeting. And when I grew up, we were all worried about overpopulation. That was the fear, oh, the world is, and now, of course, the humans are going away. So living longer will help for that too.
Yeah, and that is true because when you were looking at population and everything that's happening, it what a big shift when we were younger, and how cultures have changed now as well. Because when you're looking at males today, the woke crowd, we have Generation Z, Z, X, all the way across the board. But when we start looking at males over 50, and finding purpose, and we just talked about the purpose thing, longevity, the meaning of longevity into somebody. Let's dive into that. What does it really mean to have longevity in life? Now, longevity could be somebody say, well, longevity to me is I just want to live to 50. Okay, that's my longevity. What does it truly mean to have great longevity? And I don't mean by a lifespan of living to 120, but having purpose in life to be able to say, what does that mean to fulfill being healthy? The next day you die, you're healthy versus not being. So explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me put a quick pin in that and just amplify one thing you said before about men in particular being vulnerable to this. I mean, as a man,
Yeah.
I know that men as they get older are different than women as they get older. My wife's saying, hey, I know my wife goes, she goes to lunch, she goes to dinner, she's constantly hanging out with other wives and moms from school and stuff, and da 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 da. She goes, why don't you hang out with dads, and do the same thing that I do? And I go, well, honey, dads don't do that as much. They're busy with other stuff and they don't do that. And she goes, no, they do. You just don't get invited. Nobody
Yeah.
invites you. But it's actually, I think maybe there's a little bit of that too. But I think it is true. Men are more isolated. Men are more vulnerable to lack of connections, and this is really a challenge that we need to pay attention to. And I think the figures you were quoting about suicide and everything, reflect that as well. That as men, we need to pay even more attention to that because it doesn't come natural to us as much as, we're not necessarily as gregarious, not to stereotype, but we're not necessarily as gregarious and as outgoing as women are sometimes. But anyway, to your second question about longevity, what does longevity mean? Well, I guess you hinted at this, and I just want to amplify this too, that when we're talking about lifespan, we really mean health span. It means healthy years, right? Nobody, if I say you're going to live 20 years longer, I don't want 20 more years in the nursing home or, 20 more years of being impaired and frail and all those things. So we're talking about health span and whatever that is for us. And I think you make a good point. For some people, it's 50 years, and that's what God or whoever intended. But I think realistically, we will live at least to 65, which is sort of the reason retirement's set up there, I think. But with lifestyle, in my opinion, I think we can live another 60 years just with paying critical attention to lifestyle and everything like that. And now there's a revolution in longevity research, things like partial epigenetic reprogramming with Yamanaka factors, exosomes setting our central biological aging clock, and so really, really off the wall longevity things. And I think beyond that, that may be the third 60 years. The longest living human is 122 years. So it appears to be a barrier from that. But with these new longevity things, who knows? People, Peter Diamandis and others talk about the longevity escape velocity, which is an interesting concept. It's that as science progresses, we're getting better and better at increasing lifespan. And, 1 year now, for every year that we live, we're increasing the lifespan of 3 months. And then it's 6 months. And when it gets to be 1 month, 1 year for every year we live, then we essentially reach what's called longevity escape velocity. In other words, every year that you live, our longevity is increased by 1 year based on technology and developments and all. So you just keep kicking the can down the road and you never reach the end. In fact, I have some colleagues are saying if we can just live 5 years longer now without dying of something stupid, or unexpected, they believe there's a good chance we can reach that longevity escape velocity. So that's why I don't ride motorcycles anymore. I stopped base jumping. High risk events though, if we're close to longevity escape velocity, maybe, we always should pay attention to our health anyway.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode.
And you think about living longer, how does that, that's going to affect your old age pension. That all of a sudden people are living longer, the insurance is going to go up. And then now governments physically have to now change just to account for, okay, we're going to change it to, said old age pension 65. Now you're going to be 75.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the changes are going to come faster around AI and replacements that are just going to completely upend economics of wages. And I don't know if it's, basic income now or whatnot. I mean, we have driverless taxis in LA now that I literally ride every day that are fully automated. They're from Waymo, which is a Google subsidiary, but there are other companies doing it, and they're completely safe. I sit in the back seat. I can sleep in them. They're very safe. They go, in a 60-mile radius around here. They also have them in Arizona, and they're going to Miami and different places now. So they're going across the country. My car, my Tesla, has this full self-driving, which never really worked. I've had Teslas for years, and it never really worked. Well, guess what? This year in February, they did a software upgrade. So now full self-driving works. In other words, I get my Tesla, I punch in the destination, I sit back, I don't even have to touch the wheel, and it drives door to door on the freeway, stop signs, changing lanes, everything without any intervention. So I'm not in the back seat to sleep, but it's like having a driver in the car, and it's so much more relaxing. And this is coming to all cars. It's not a plug for Tesla. I realize it's a very political subject, but I try not to let politicians or politics dictate my lifestyle choices. But anyway, but yeah, so these things are coming. The world is changing. When that comes, 10,000 truck drivers are going to be out of a job. How many Uber drivers are going to be out of a job? Doctors, software engineers, the gym I go to, the place I go to for my strength training, they're all machines, which means no free weights, but the machines are all hooked up to AI. So it all records it. I swipe in with a band I have on my arm, and the machine knows exactly me. It knows my weights. It knows what my current strength is down to the pound. And it gives me a workout based on that. It knows my VO2 max, it knows my body composition, it knows my weight, it knows everything because it keeps testing it and it upgrades it every day. I do a strength training, and I'm 2 pounds stronger. Okay, then it updates it 2 pounds and it does all that. But the point is, it's all done with AI, and it's not like a video game. When you exercise, it's on the screen and you just follow it that way. But who would have thought in my wildest dreams that artificial intelligence would be replacing, trainers, personal trainers? Because that's literally what they're doing. This AI says, hey, you know what? Your muscle group on your back is stronger than your muscles on your front by 5 pounds. You need to do more on your front. This side is a little bit stronger than this side. It's something that, it's really challenging for a trainer to keep track of all those things necessarily.
Well, let's talk more about the AI aspect, because when you're talking about medical school, when you went to medical school, okay, obviously AI was not there, and where it is now, and you've just gave a quick snapshot on the past, then the present right now, where AI is, the Teslas and the driving and the workout. How do you see this in the medical field with what you're doing? So the past and like I said, the past. Here's the present, your feelings.
It's going to be transformative and for the better, because One thing about AI is our large language model, our generative AI, our agents today, they're able to assimilate huge amounts of knowledge. When I talk to ChatGPT 4, one of the leading open AI ones, but there are numerous ones out there, I can ask them literally anything about any book that's ever written, and they will summarize the plot to me, and they'll compare it with another book that's, that I mean, the depth of knowledge is incredible. It's not perfect, and we have a way to go, but it's breathtaking. There's nothing like it so far. So now let's overlay that on a patient visit. I come in, I'm a new patient. I come in to see my doctor. Maybe they spend an hour with me for the first visit, and they run through my chart and everything. And let's say I have a complex chronic condition. My chart is this thick, or the digital equivalent of that is hundreds of pages, because I've been to many hospitals and everything. What does that doctor do? Well, they'll talk to me, and they'll give me an hour of their time. They'll look at the chart, but they'll only read the top chart. They will read the summary of what all the other doctors thought of everything there. There's no human that can possibly integrate all that information. Yet there may be things in that chart that are important for me. Maybe there was some symptom that I reported when I was 12 years old, and my leg was fractured, and it was something happened there that that a single doctor isn't aware of. So I think, long answer for short question, but I think we're going to see dramatic improvements in healthcare just through the assimilation of large amounts of knowledge. I work with a company now called Rio. They're out of London, but they're going to be in the US, and other companies are doing this too. They have an app that's on my smartphone, and I've given it my genetics from a cheek swab. I've given it my blood work, and I wear a ring. It's like an Aura ring, but it's one they have that's much less expensive. I have a CGM in my arm. And then the app is hooked up to an LLM, which is a large language model. And I can go, good morning. And it knows all my data. It knows my labs. It knows my genetics and everything. It goes, wow, I'm feeling tired today. And it goes, the app can say, well, your glucose from your CGM is very high. Maybe you ate too many carbs. Oh, and by the way, from the ring, it says, you only had 10 minutes of REM sleep last night, and you only slept for 6 hours altogether. You need 8 hours of sleep. Otherwise, you're going to feel like this every day. So it gives me insights into things. And then it's getting even more. I mean, that's just the beginning, because I have a colleague, a friend who's working in a company here in Southern California, and other companies are doing this too as well, but they're developing large language models that don't just look at conventional medical things, but you give it permission, with certain privacy guardrails, but you give it permission to look at your entire life. In other words, what does that mean? It looks at your social media, it looks at your phone calls, it looks at your texts, it looks at your emails, it looks at where you drive your car. And from that, it can analyze things. It can take all your emails and analyze your groups of friends. Let's say you have 10 friends, and it's 3 friends here. It does sentiment analysis on the email. So it'll go, with these friends, you're always joking. It's kind of a lighthearted conversation. There's another one here. Oh, these friends are your friends where you always talk about dying and disease, and it's always morbid and people are sad. And then these friends, this is sort of business. It's just a very superficial level there. And it'll analyze it. And then it'll go, then it could track it over time. It'll go, wow, today I noticed you're not, over the last week, you haven't done emails, or you're not being funny anymore with your funny friends. You're being sad with your funny friends, and you're being even sadder with your sad friends. And it can analyze that. And even, simple things. It's like, hey, the last month you went to the gym every 4 days. Now you're going to the liquor store and the strip club. What's up with that? And it literally could tell you, what's going on in your life. And these things, we already know this reflects depression. For example, when people stop texting, and they stop emailing and they withdraw, well, those things can be measured. Maybe not with a blood test necessarily, or even a ring, but there are other social things that the AI is going to have access to one way or another.
And it's interesting because as you start talking into that, and it's about I'm looking at it as curiosity because you're mentioning stuff I hadn't heard, and I'm thinking, wait a second, what's creating purpose? So I'm getting into the guys over 50, okay, creating purpose, what we talked earlier. But what's really interesting, this is like an accountability keeper. That's all of a sudden he's in your pocket, he's right there. You got your finger, you've got around your wrist, you've got it on your arm, you've got everything just saying, hey, just giving you that nudge to say, hey, let's go to the next level. You know what? I'm recognizing you do this. You really want to change. What's the next step of changing? And it's creating accountability where you never had accountability before.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are already agents, companies that make psychological assistants that are trained on your background and everything else that will have discussions with you. And, it's like, hey, just met this, this girl, she has red hair, blah, blah, whatever, and go, wait a minute. You went out with a girl just like that, 3 times ago, and this is what happened. Or I want to buy this shirt, and no, and they'll go, no, you bought that shirt, a very similar shirt, and you had, different consequences. So it can, yeah, give you feedback on actions and even purpose. If it knows everything about your life, all the way back to your childhood, and you say, gee, I'm struggling, let's talk about my purpose, and maybe it can't tell you your purpose, but it can, like you say, guide you through accountability and come up with ideas that will be empowering, that will light a flame in somebody. Because if somebody doesn't have purpose, all the longevity drugs and lifestyle things and everything else, I'll tell you, if somebody has no purpose and no reason for living, they will die. We've all seen it happen with, spouses and partners and, things like that. But it happens all the time. And it's an overriding factor. It's more important than anything else, I think.
And it's so amazing because the accountability issue, and you know what, and having that aspect of it of not feeling judged, asking a question where some men will, oh, if I'm going to open up, I'm going to feel judged on this, but all of a sudden this actually opens it up that you're not being judged at all. You get control of your own environment, and you get to decide which way you want to go. Take the advice, not the advice from your own advice.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as human beings, we all do something called projection. We meet a doctor, and oh, subconsciously that doctor reminds me of my father, so I'm gonna try and please him or her, or that therapist reminds me of my mother or my, any take your pick of your archetype of figures in your life. And what research has shown is that people are much more open to talking to an AI than they are to talking to humans. They'll reveal things about themselves that they wouldn't reveal to a human because they feel judgment. They have this projection onto them. But interestingly, when they're talking to an AI, a disembodied voice, or it may even be with an embodied person, but when they know that it's not a human being that's judging them, they're being more forthcoming. And when people are more forthcoming and honest and revealing about themselves, we all know that the therapy can be much, much more effective if people are being honest and open.
That is absolutely amazing. Now, quick question. I want to know, where does people get your book and all that good stuff?
Well, you get it at the library. You don't have to pay for it. There,
Oh,
check it out. You can, or if you want to check it out and see a chapter, you can go to my website and download the first chapter for free, either in PDF site or audio version. My website is robertlufkinmd.com, and you can download it from there. And it's also available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all independent bookstores, anywhere you want to get it.
so is there one last thing that you would like to tell the listeners? One thing that we hadn't talked, and just something totally out there.
Well, just a general question is people ask me, aren't you depressed about this book? What you're going through. And actually, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I think it's empowering. The whole idea of lifestyle and as a patient, we take control of our lives. The doctors they're helpful, they give us good information, but ultimately, as a patient, I'm empowered. I'm the CEO of my life. I get to decide every morning when I wake up what I do, when I do it. And that's, to me, that's so hopeful and so empowering.
You know what, Robert? That was an excellent lead in and finishing up. And thank you very much. You know what? Like, subscribe, hit that power button, hit everything, whatever needs to be done here. You know what? That was a great interview. Thanks, Robert, for being on Shed Talk.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. I love the questions. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.